I know we've been gone for a minute here, but we're back with you. So very glad to have you all with us here today. We got a few things on my mind. I wanted to start about the white supremacist racial massacre that happened in Buffalo that everybody is talking about. And the corporate media is very quickly wanting to move on beyond that because this is not very damn flattering. They would very much like to have us discuss something else. But we're not discussing anything else because this is the news and this is a reminder. Now, for those of you who may not be aware, on my Sunday program on YouTube, and if you haven't signed up for YouTube, the link is in the description of my profile, but we have about almost 10,000 people in there watching. And what I did was something you haven't seen anybody else do. I started reading from the manifesto. Peyton Gendron, I started reading from the manifesto that he put together. And the biggest lie in the world, when you have the so-called left and the so-called right agreeing on something, that's when you know that it's an absolute lie. When you have both sides of the so-called political spectrum agreeing, and both your so-called liberal media and Fox News, Tucker Carlson himself, referred to Gendron's manifesto as, quote, rambling. All of them want you to sit here and say he was rambling. It was just rambling. It was incoherent rambling. I read it for you all. That's a lie to say it was incoherent rambling. It was not. It was clearly articulated white supremacy. Very clearly articulated. It was articulated at a level that a fifth grader could understand with perfect clarity. It was very clear what it was. So you have both sides of the political spectrum now attempting to tell you, you don't need to read it, you don't need to see it, don't worry about it, nothing to see here. No problems, nothing to see here. It's just a bunch of rambling. When that couldn't be further from the truth. It was a whole lot more sensible and a whole lot more familiar than they want you to think about. Because we've been hearing it for years and years. And the simple fact of the matter is that when you have weaned people on white supremacy, the idea is that the spokespeople for white supremacy are the ones who butch up and encourage and egg on their supporters to hit the streets and to go do something. And that's the whole idea. From Dylan Roof to Charlottesville to Buffalo, that's the idea. Get them beefed up so that they'll go out and go do something. And of course, they're going to claim, oh, well, we're just very sorry. This is not at all what we intended. This is exactly what they intended. It wouldn't keep repeating itself if that was not what was intended. It's absolutely what is intended. Remove black people by any means necessary. Now, YouTube took the video down. They didn't put a strike on my channel, but they took my video down. They claimed it had violent content in it. There wasn't 1 millisecond of violent content. Nothing at all. Not even one. But YouTube took the video down. Now, it's obvious why they took the video down. It wasn't because anything you could see in there was no violence in it. It was because I dared to do what the white media and the old black media simply wouldn't. I actually said, you know what? Let me go take a look at the 180-page manifesto for myself. I'm not going to take their word for it. Let me go take a look at that thing for myself. And I'll go check it out and I'll decide for myself if it's, quote, rambling or if it's rational. And from the white supremacist point of view, it's a classic textbook. It is everything we've been hearing. It's everything we've known. He was just very blatant about it. It was the articulation of Jared Taylor and the youthful influence. By the way, Richard Spencer also talked to being an environmentalist. Peyton Gendron and Richard Spencer both talk the same about the Earth's resources and environmentalism and the need to preserve the Earth and green economy and things. Yeah, this is exactly right up their alley. All these parallels didn't come out of nowhere. There's a reason why the media does not want to discuss this at all, is because this is exactly what we've been saying. This is white supremacy for the millennials and younger now, whatever's coming after the millennials. This is the white supremacy for the next generation, which is why it is so important that you keep your eye on the Kyle Rittenhouses and the Peyton Gendrons. You have to keep your eye on them now in your neighborhoods where you are. The civil rights generation attempted desperately to convince us all that they had won, the war was over, we're in a post-racial society. Now heap praise on them. You don't see any of them cheering now. Nobody's doing any victory laps. As a matter of fact, it's a bunch of hiding. If you take a look on my Twitter's feed today, Hillary Clinton and a bunch of other politicians talking about we need to do something about guns, guns, guns. We need to do something about guns. Not a word about we need to have a comprehensive war on white supremacy. We've had a war on terror, whatever that is. We've had a war on drugs. We have a war on gangs. We've got everything except a war on white supremacy. Let the bodies pile up. We've got everything except that. Kind of makes you wonder, if you investigate those things enough, they're worried that a bunch of folk here who are supposed to be investigating white supremacy may find themselves in handcuffs. Now, might they? A bunch of people who actually will be telling you they're investigating it will actually be getting indicted for it. The Los Angeles Sheriff's Department is the most infamous in the country right now for gangs in blue, and in their case, gangs in brown, green, whatever. They're just the most infamous. They're far from the only one. Far from the only one. In Gendron's manifesto, he even mentions that. The white supremacists, the people that he knows, the people that he associates with, mostly are involved in the military and public services, i.e. public safety, i.e. the police, sheriffs. So in other words, the key areas here where they have authority, which gives one citizen authority over another, keep that in mind, gives one citizen authority over another. There's a reason why they don't want there to be a bunch of black firefighters. There's a reason why they don't want that. In New York, you had fights with the white supremacist firefighters attacking black firefighters. They don't want black firefighters. Talk about first responders. In reality, they don't want that. In my home state of Louisiana, as well as several other states, for example, the fire department, you can get a ticket from the fire department. If they go to an intersection and you're blocking the intersection or something, if you're in the way or interfere with them, you can actually end up with a citation as a result of that. So in effect, you can get ticketed by the fire department. As you know, in most places, if you're interfering with the fire department's duties and whatnot, if your car is in the way of a fire hydrant, they can bust out the windows. But let's be very, very clear. If it also comes to court or something like that, they'll take the word of the fire department or the paramedics over yours. So there's a reason why that's actually a powerful position to be in, and you don't think of it that way because they don't carry guns per se. They don't carry guns per se. So that's something I want you to keep in mind in this regard, is they don't want you seeing that there. And like I say, folks have had links to it. It's a very, it's not rambling either. It's 180 pages and it's long, but that's only because in two areas he goes on for a couple dozen pages about Jewish people and the usual crackpot nonsense there. Not nonsense in the form of rambling, just he posts every meme and cartoon that you've ever seen on 4chan or 8chan or Reddit or Stormfront. It was every one of those cartoons you ever saw there. And then he went on for 38 pages about body armor. I know, I counted them. He went on for 38 pages going into absolutely withering detail about body armor, about the different body armors that he was considering, about what he finally chose, and why he did and did not choose certain body armor. He went into withering detail. Now, I didn't read any of that information, but I did let you know that, by the way, he did an exhaustive amount of research into it. So anybody who would actually be, which I understood the point of it, this was meant to be, anarchist cookbook. He's going into withering detail because he wants to do the footwork to make it, basically white supremacist terrorism for dummies. Hey, this is the armor I chose. Here are lesser armors, but you can purchase these. And here's why I got this one, certified by NIJ. You can go do this. That's basically what it was. Now, that's something that needs to be discussed and talked about. That needs to be talked about. That an 18-year-old white male would have the time or interest to go into this much detail, because that tells you something. That really tells you about your society. He's not interested in being on social media. He's interested in, quote, gathering together with like-minded individuals. This is who your kids are going to school with. These are the people your kids are going to school with, going to college with. That you'll be, if you're at a job that has people of various ages there that you're working next to, there's a reason for this. It's very important to know exactly what they're thinking and to compare whether or not you're on the same footing, whether or not you're on the same page as them. Take a look at their priorities and then take a look at yours. Take a look at what holds their interest and then take a look at what holds yours. Take a look at what preoccupies their time and then take a look at what preoccupies yours. And you can sit up and tell yourself that whatever you're fixating on is so much more valuable. Yeah, it always is, right? Until it gets out there. There were all kinds of details that people didn't understand. For example, there were some folks who were saying, how is it you could let the shooter walk all the way up to the front door? In his manifesto, he specifically said that when he did his dry runs on the place, that the idea was to pull up in front of the store, right up in front of the main pillar where the front doors were, pull up in front of the store, right there in front of the store now, not in the parking lot, and come walking out like a customer. He's planned this out and said, I'm going to park in front of the store. Yes, folks, I read the manifesto. He went into detail about the procedure that he was going to take that day before he did it. Park right in front of the store, in front of the main pillar, and get out with weapons in hand. I timed it. This should take about 2.5 seconds. So from the time that his foot, from the time of him putting the car in park to the time of him being out and unloading, he said he had timed it already. This should take about 2 seconds. So for those of you who are not aware, no, he didn't do like you and find a nice space in the parking lot and come walk up to the front door. These are details that the general public needs to be aware of. You know why? Because after 9/11, they were telling us that, there could be Islamists, radicalized Islamists. Remember that term? Radical Muslims, radicalized Islamists. Why, next they'll be attacking a Walmart. How many of you remember that after 9/11? After September 11, 2001? The World Trade Center attacks. I have to say that now because you have to understand it's now been 21 years. For those of us who are a bit older now, we have to remember there are a bunch of people listening to me right now. They weren't even born when 9/11 happened. Just like a bunch of us were not born when JFK or Dr. King or Malcolm X was assassinated. We were born right after that. There are a bunch of folks listening to me right now. You weren't even born when the 9/11 attacks happened. So if people like me don't remind you of some of the stuff that was being said on a mass scale, you can go YouTube it now. It was being said on a mass scale. Radical Islamists, Fox News, and some of your liberal outlets too, by the way. Radical Islamists, radical Muslims. Okay, let's talk about the radical white supremacists, the radicalized teen white supremacists. Because you told us we had to watch out for radicalized Muslims because first they hit the World Trade Towers, great big huge target. Next they could hit a Walmart. Why, this would be a very simple crime. Hit a Walmart. Why, they might run over a bunch of people in a car, and then you come here to America and there's really only one group running over people in cars. But they can shoot up a Walmart. They could blow up or shoot up a Walmart. Yeah, well, how'd that one pan out too? While you told the world they need to be watching out for, quote, radicalized Muslims. While you told the world about that, take a look at what was really happening. Talk about a head fake. And if I didn't remind you all of this now, would you even have recalled it? Having reliable information is critical. It is not optional. It's critical to have reliable information from reliable sources that can give you these things in their proper context. So no, it was not rambling. It was white supremacy, white supremacist terrorism for dummies. And you need to be aware of this. Jason, why do I need to be aware of this? Because now we've gone beyond the theoretical. Your social media outlets, YouTube, they want you to be intellectually disarmed. Hell, they want you to be mentally and emotionally and physically disarmed. He sat there in his manifesto and spoke about the tactics he was using. As I said, he spoke about the type of body armor, the type of weapon, the location, why he specifically chose the location. We're talking about tactics and principles here. Methods and tactics. We are talking about specific methods and tactics. And black folk need to be aware he's not, first of all, he wasn't the first one. He wasn't the first one. Remember the one who shot up the Kroger, the Waffle House in Antioch, Tennessee, Dylan Roof. We can go down the list. A bunch of folk here who wanted to get close to where black folk were. Targeting black people in areas you'd be unaware to try to take you off guard. If I can just get 3 or 4 of you, how will they do it? How does it go down? In Dylan Roof's case, let me snuggle up to you. Don't worry, the old black folk in the church, they love white folk, and they'll be glad to let me in through the front door. And after that, the slaughter starts. They've researched us. You see, that's the problem. It is not enough to sit up here and have a simple-minded reaction that, well, white supremacists hate black folk. That's all I need to know. You need to know much more than that. You need to know their methods and practices, because that's the point that we're at now. It has gone beyond theory. And what I'm telling you is that there's no way on this side of southwestern hell that an 18-year-old white kid who just last year was threatening to shoot up his school, and the police in the school didn't think that needed to be charged with a crime. Don't worry about that. Now, your black children, 6 years old, in handcuffs you go, even if they haven't committed a crime, by the way. There's no way in the world that he planned doing that by himself. He got a lot of information and insight and coaching from other people. It would have been too difficult for him to be able, the body armor thing was too difficult to go into by himself. That's information he would have gotten from other people. There would have been other people who would have had to give him that information and say, hey, get this type of body armor, not that type of body armor. He has specifically mentioned that he was getting ceramic armor, not steel. He wanted ceramic and not steel, because he specifically researched the type of rounds. He's like, well, if the security guards, I saw their guns, and these are the types of rounds that would be in those guns. So this is the type of body armor that would be effective at stopping those rounds. And it was. Damn right, I'm yelling it. Yes, he's researched what type of rounds the police had. And oh yeah, by the way, the National Institute of Justice says what type of body armor will stop those rounds. What do you know? And it wasn't hypothetical, and it wasn't irrational rambling, because what he said was what he did, and it worked. So for those of you who did not read it, I didn't actually go into this much detail on YouTube, by the way, because I didn't want anybody there accusing me of saying, oh, you're giving information, this, that, and the other. Okay, I didn't even do that. They took the broadcast down anyway, which tells you just how effective it really was. You're damn right they're worried to hell about that, because they do not want black people to be fully informed about just how far along the situation really is. We've gone beyond the point of people don't like you and they might try to shoot you. We've gone to people don't like you because you're black. They have accepted it as a religion and a doctrine, and they are sitting down writing whole term papers about how to best effectively and methodically kill you in mass. And the media is telling us we shouldn't know the exact conclusions they've come to. Now that you all have some understanding, by the way, he did a dry run. He walked into the place. He scoped out where the security guard was and the general area he'd be hanging out at. He had a diagram there that marked it. He had a diagram on there to show where he was going to stop his car at. He had timed exactly how long it would be. I mean, he went into extremely withering detail, which sounds more like somebody told him this will only work if you get as much information as possible, and if you're going to have to time yourself to make sure of what you're doing. You don't want to get there and have a last minute screw up over something. You need to know exactly what you're doing and why. And that's exactly what it was. There's a reason why I encourage you all to read it. You need to read it so you can find out and know exactly what it is they're thinking now, because now what they're thinking is what they're doing. He was thinking about the right guns, thinking about the right body armor, thinking about the right helmet armor, thinking about the right location and what it was that qualified that location. He came from 200 miles away. Do you know how many black folk he drove by to get there? He chose that specific zip code for a reason, and that specific store for a reason. Because the folk who were there were absolutely not suspicious of anything. He stopped and talked to a couple of folk. None of them were suspicious at all. They were not suspicious of him at all. And he was like, yep, this is the spot. This is the one. Sitting ducks here. If I come back tomorrow, they're all going to be on their Bojangles thing. Hey, how you doing, Mr.? Oh, what you doing now? Bam, bam. Yeah, this is the place. Just like Dylan Roof, he didn't choose that church out of nowhere. He's like, yep, this is the spot. This is the one. Yeah, bypass everything else. This is the one. We'll go for it right here. With black, we don't need to know. We don't need to read it. We don't need to find out. We don't need to know, because others are informed. How others are equally informed what the hell is going on those places where they are grooming young white supremacist terrorists. And by the way, he admitted that he's on 4chan, 8chan, Reddit, in a number of different groups. That tells you that federal law enforcement and local law enforcement, they were already aware of him. You got them arresting black rappers at labels who haven't done an attempt of what he did. They were already aware of him. Remember, the feds can get your damn IP address. When they get your IP address, and by the way, they don't really need a court order anymore. They really don't even need that anymore. So let's stop that nonsense. They can monitor every damn thing you're doing, and they know exactly who the hell it is saying it. They know exactly who it is. They didn't just jump up and say, okay, we're not sure what's going on. They were certainly aware of him, absolutely aware of him after he threatened his school. And yes, I saw the damn briefing where the police were talking about, well, you know, when he threatened the school, it was evaluated and determined at that time there wasn't a threat. But, you know, I mean, now we got to deal with this. Really? Really? When's the last time you heard black folk in that situation and you heard that phrase? Well, he was arrested, but we determined it wasn't a threat. When you're black, whether you committed a crime or not, you're always considered a threat. There are a bunch of black folk, I guarantee you, in that store who've been harassed by police or even arrested for a crime that they didn't commit. Meanwhile, here comes a white teen who couldn't even get arrested for a crime that he did intend to commit. Couldn't even get arrested for that. Couldn't even get arrested for a terroristic threat. Couldn't even get arrested for that. This is where we're at today, with people saying that you don't need all the information. Yes, you do. You need to know every detail of that. Yes, you do. And I'm not going to say everything that was in it. This is 180 pages. But what I am saying is that there was nothing in there that was put in there by mistake or by chance, particularly I will say the third part of it. If you chop it up into three parts, particularly that third part, that was all methods and practices. This is okay. Now, here's how I'm going to do it. Here's a list of firearms I considered, and here's the ones that made the cut. And here's why they did. He talked about weapons he considered to be inferior to what he got. He talked about weapons he considered to be superior to what he got. There's no way in the hell he tested all these weapons. There's no way that he did. There was literally dozens on there. There's no way he did that. What that tells you is that that's a list he got from somebody else with much more experience. Somebody older, somebody more informed with much more experience told him, these are, take a look at all these weapons here, and you can try this one here, but these are no good. These are crap. These are all right. These are not great, but serviceable. These are good, and these are excellent. No, an 18-year-old is not going to be able to make that determination. Somebody much older who owns a gun store or has a lot of experience with firearms, that's the only person who's going to be able to make that type of determination. That's it. That's the only way he would do that. It doesn't work any other way. For the body armor, how many damn 18-year-olds even would consider something like, no, the National Institute of Justice certifies body armor. Really? How many 18-year-olds would even think that? Answer: none. It would take an adult to tell them that. How many of you today, when you buy a product, how many of you even look for the UL symbol? Remember when we were children? Underwriters Laboratories? Remember that when we were kids? Underwriters Laboratories. Remember the UL symbol you used to see on things all the time? That was, hell, that one in Good Housekeeping for certain cleaning products. You had Underwriters Laboratories for your electronics and electrical devices. You had Good Housekeeping seal of approval for cleaning products. How many of you today have kids who even know what those are? Even if you could find a product that has it on there, because remember, you get most of your stuff from China now. So how many of you even have kids who would recognize or even know what the UL symbol means? A, what it is, and B, why it's there. How many of you have kids who would even know, could even tell you? So how is it that this 18-year-old is looking for the NIJ certification? How is it he knows specifically to look for that? When if you told him about Underwriters Laboratories, he'd be looking at you the way that you look at old black and white movies with no sound and no subtitles. Somebody older, much more experienced, and much more knowledgeable had to have coached him on what to look for and how. And we have a federal government and state government, shout out Letitia James, who are ignoring it. Letitia James, who never saw a crime against black people that she didn't have total apathy over. Letitia James, who never saw a crime against black people that she didn't gladly overlook. Now let it happen to Asian or LGBT, and she's going to be the first one telling you about the action that needs to be taken. Letitia James talks to black folk the same way that white politicians talk to black folk. This show is bad. This sure is harmful, but we will not be intimidated by hate. Okay, and what are you going to do about it? I'm here to hold your hands, baby. For everybody else, we need to take action. We need laws. I'm filing lawsuits. Hell, in New York, remember, there were a number of black folk who got arrested for harassing Asians. They never got to the shooting stage. They got arrested for verbally harassing Asians. Remember? Remember earlier this year, they got arrested for verbally harassing. Last year, verbally harassing. just verbally, didn't physically do anything to anyone. And yet you don't see anybody saying the same thing about us 400 years later. So yes, the young people take a look at that. And just like he said in his manifesto that, well, he wanted to go to New York because he knew that New York's gun laws make sure that people are either completely disarmed or their guns are cucked. That is, that their guns are going to have artificial limitations put on them. Law-abiding citizens will have very limited rounds. Meanwhile, the bad guys, people like him, will take their guns, modify them, which is very easy to do, so they can hold longer rounds, so they can fire more rounds. Now, if he understood that, then he also understood, and by the way, yeah, black folk don't have any protections. He went after the easiest targets. Black people don't have any protections. Not protected by their own politicians. Jimbo Jangles Clyburn is sitting up here already talking about homophobia and transphobia and LGBT and abortion. Yeah, he stepped right over black folks' dead bodies and said, now back to things that really matter. LGBT and illegal and non-citizens. We can talk about that now. Right back to business as usual. And Joe Biden wants to do the exact same thing. The only time they want to discuss any of this stuff is on their terms, which simply means acknowledging that it exists. We already know it exists. We've known this existed now for hundreds of years. We're talking about the punitive phase where you proactively do something about it. And that's the component that is missing because they want it to be missing because the goal is to sit up and acknowledge white supremacy while simultaneously doing nothing about it. And now that this fella sat up here and wrote a whole manifesto, he blabbed in obnoxious detail about exactly how you can do what he did, which means that other folks sat around. Because you have to understand, these folks have been sitting around forever war gaming this. They sit around constantly doing that. Constantly. They sit around constantly having these types of things. The writer Tom Clancy, him and friends used to sit around what they call blue skying, although that's also something that happens in the intelligence community. In the intelligence community, they have something called blue skying, which means that basically to think up a threat, regardless of the practicality of it. In other words, they don't want you limiting yourself by what you would consider to be practical. What is a conceivable threat? Anything you could conceive of, not what you think is practical. One of the things Clancy came up with is, well, if you were a terrorist and you needed to do a mass killing, but you didn't have you couldn't bring rockets to America, well, you could hijack an airplane and use that as a missile. If you used it in a kamikaze attack, effectively, you've turned the airplane into a missile. You see, they sit around these groups all the time for decades and decades now, not talking about how much they just don't like us. But by the way, here's what can be done to them. Here's how it can be done. Here's how you can kill the most people most effectively. And you have a corporate media that is telling us that we can't even discuss this. They don't even want you to be able to read it. A bunch of the news outlets were talking about the manifesto. None of them actually showed it. And all of them said, oh, it's just rambling. It didn't matter whether it was ABC, CNN, or Fox. All of them said the same thing, rambling, a rambling manifesto. So you're going to sit up here and try to denigrate it. No, they're denigrating it because they don't want you, the general public, knowing or reading it. Take a look at the results. The manifesto basically laid out how he was going to do it. You tell me if it was rambling or incoherent. It was a game plan. It was solid. A fifth grader could understand his rationales and reasons. Didn't say you agree with him. You could understand it. And what I'm saying is that it's not enough for us to say, well, we know what white supremacists out there, and we already know they're out there. Okay, it's gone beyond out there. They're not out there anymore. They're in here. They're in here. And this time it was an 18-year-old white male Next time, it'll be a 30-year-old white female or a 45-year-old white male or older than that. The idea is that we have to be on guard against it now to recognize that this is no longer theoretical. One of the things I was thinking about was the fact that when I was researching everything that I did for my Sunday broadcast that YouTube took down because truth is forbidden today. In the white supremacist social order, the truth is forbidden. One of the things I saw there, I had a collage of white supremacist police officers who've gone to prison. Amber Geiger, Derek Chauvin. Her name escapes me off the top of my head, but she was the white woman who was just recently sent. They've been taking back-to-back L's. They've been taking back-to-back L's. And no, it didn't escape me that, by the way, this happened right after April. I'm pretty sure he wanted to be ready by April because he had all the white supremacist and Nazi iconography. And remember, those are two separate things. Don't let the media sit up here and tell you that you're only a white supremacist if you're a Nazi. No. But he had all the Nazi iconography. He was reciting the 14 words. Must ensure the existence of our people and the future for white children. So if he's that deep off in the paint, then he knows full well what April is. That would be something he wouldn't want to say publicly because, oh boy, that would codify and solidify everything that the new black media has been trying to tell you all. So they're not going to go quite that far with it. And he was like, well, I missed April, but better late than never. Let's go ahead and take some bodies. And right now, tonight, your law enforcement agencies, so-called law enforcement agencies, they're playing dumb. They're playing stupid. They're pretending they don't know. They're pretending they're clueless. Of course, they're claiming it's a lone wolf. It's amazing. So many lone wolves, and yet the attacks continue. All these lone wolves. You can draw a direct line, not an indirect line, a direct line from Randy Weaver to Timothy McVeigh. From Randy Weaver to David Koresh to Timothy McVeigh, you can draw a direct line between them. And the federal government's position is that in all these cases, it's just lone wolves, nothing more to investigate here. Let's move along. And yet you could draw a direct line from Randy Weaver all the way until Timothy McVeigh. And I suggest to you that you can actually keep that line going. But the government and the media are telling you that those are all, every time it happens, it's a lone wolf. Every time. It's just one. We don't need to investigate anymore. Investigation's over. We've seen enough. Move along. Nothing to see here. Yes. Very bad, very tragic. Lone wolves. Well, that's how they get down. And then every time it happens, you're being told, yep, another lone wolf. Boy, got a lot of wolves out here. Yeah, a whole bunch of wolves hanging out. And it just kind of sucks, man. We're in wolf territory. Well, you know, if you look up and you got a pack of wolves, that's your first clue that this isn't lone behavior anymore when you got a pack of them. It's one thing if a wolf show up once every few decades. One showing up every few months, there's a different issue. That's a different issue. Which brings me to the next logical conclusion to make, by the way. Every time you turn around, you're hearing about black folk being shot in certain places. And I want you to understand, anywhere and everywhere where black folk are being shot and there's no suspect in custody, I want you to understand, is it too much for you to consider that might be another Peyton Gendron who's that's the methodology? Yeah, don't get out of the car and do that. You might only get one or two, but be a whole lot easier to just drive by and get them, don't you think? For the ones who really want to get down like that, remember Kyle Rittenhouse was driving around with his friends looking for targets. Remember? They were driving around. And in the car, first thing he thought was, man, if I had my gun, I could pick off a few of them right now as we're driving by. They're totally unsuspecting. Yeah, we could do that right now. I'm just connecting the dots for you because your corporate media outlets will not do so, and that's dangerous. They've psychologically disarmed you. They've psychologically disarmed you, mentally disarmed you. I've been saying now for over a decade of doing this that Black people are ignorant at our own peril, that you live in a society where white society knows everything about you, and we know blissfully little about them as a group. As a group, Black people are mostly blissfully uninformed. You can see what they do, but you can't tell us why they do it. Some of the things you like, some you don't, some you mock, some you admire. What you can't do is tell us why they do it. They, however, study us in meticulous detail. They can tell you what we do, and they can tell you why we do it. Like an anthropologist or a biologist studying plants. And Black folk are sitting around, well, we know they're racist. I don't even know no more than that. Okay. You need to understand an ideology so you can understand how it works, because that is what puts you ahead. You would never work for the FBI studying terrorism if you didn't understand the ideology of Islamic terrorism or white supremacist terrorism for that matter. You couldn't work on a gang drug unit if you didn't understand the gang politics. For those of you who don't live in a city like Los Angeles, but if you live in a city that has a gang unit, one of the first things you get taught about is the gangs, hand symbols, cultures, ideology, what they believe in. You have to actually find out what they believe in, not just, well, they're wearing red and blue, and they got a gun and like to shoot. You could never be a gang officer giving such a ridiculously primitive response. You couldn't just sit up and say, well, they're gang members. I mean, all they do is get shoot and get into criminal trouble. That's just what they do. No, you have to understand the what's and the whys. Because the only way you can be ahead of them is to know them better than they know themselves. Or you at least have to know them as well as they know themselves. You don't get to get in those kind of positions there, cheering to people and bragging about how ignorant you are. And as Black people, we need to know these folk as at least as well, preferably better than they know themselves. When I did my documentary film Race War, there was a reason why I went into the ideology of it. Even to the point of showing the discrepancy between the ideological standpoint of the younger Richard Spencer and the elder Jared Taylor. I didn't just sit up here and give some simple-minded response about, well, white supremacy is bad. No. It's a much more sophisticated machine, and it needs to be dealt with that way. Because guess what? In not so surprising turn of events, because it's not a turn of events, exactly what we said in Race War is exactly what is happening now. Now that Richard Spencer is over the age of 40, he's toning down the rhetoric, doesn't want to get in any more fist fights, doesn't want any more riots. He wants to get into the true elevation of white supremacy. He wants to get into an academic form of it now. In other words, he is now morphing into Jared Taylor. Doesn't want to do the incendiary stuff anymore. Which, if you saw our film years ago, you would have seen, yeah, you can see exactly where this is going now. Okay, but what does that also tell you? If Spencer is getting older and is now moving into that elder genre, that leaves the next generation of white supremacists behind him now are going to move into place. They are the young radicals who are like, yeah, you guys, you older cats ain't got no heart. You older cats are not out here in the streets. We're out here in the streets making it happen. So yes, as these white supremacists who used to be the younger are now progressing in age, the next group is coming in to take their place of young radicals. who are hitting the streets and saying nothing but violent action is going to make this happen. Remember Chris Cantwell? People dying is the cost of doing business, remember? That was what he said about Charlottesville. Well, if some people had to die, that's just the cost of doing business. That's how the young radicals see things. That's their standpoint on it. Yes, people dying is the cost of doing business. What the hell is the business? Taking back this country for white supremacy. That's the business. We don't want to philosophize. We don't want to intellectually masturbate. We don't want to have high-minded discussions. The only thing that's going to move these people is to get out here in the streets with gun in hand and move them. That's the reason that I did that film, was because I wanted you to understand white supremacy. Not just the who and the what, but the why. So that now you can see, as the events have moved along, it's done exactly what we said it was going to do. And Buffalo is the worst recent incident, but it's going to far from be the last if we're not vigilant. The next one won't look like this one. Or if it does, it'll be in yet another place you wouldn't suspect. While everybody is on their guard in New York and Brooklyn and whatnot, this happened out there in Buffalo. While everyone would have been on their guard in Nashville or in Memphis proper, the white supremacist shoots up the Waffle House in Antioch. While you got black folk who would be looking out for Charleston, for Charlotte or whatever, Dylan Roof went to Charleston. Understand something. That's the way it moves now. This is an animal that is looking to catch you unawares. It might catch you in a big city, but it doesn't like that. From the record I've seen, it doesn't actually like big cities like that. It considers those to be too hard of a target, primarily because you're more likely to run into young black people. They're looking for soft targets. Their goal is to kill as many people as they can, not to risk their own lives. So for that reason, they really don't want to get tangled up with young people if it can be avoided. So that's the other thing they're telling themselves. You can see from the effect of what they're doing. And the media isn't saying any of this. If you were really, by the way, if you really want to have a study on something, you need to have a study about, dealing with the white supremacist problem here. You can go ahead and have a study for that. It's not enough to just say, well, there's white supremacists in law enforcement, about their methods and tactics. That they look for soft targets, the elderly, children, the unarmed. They stay away from young black people if it can be avoided. So once you know the strengths and weaknesses, you can start patching up your strengths and weaknesses. That's the point. Once you know what your strengths and your weaknesses are, you can start patching those together. Now that you know that where your elderly, your children, your women are gathered, now that you know that that's an issue there, what does that tell you? Don't be an easy target. You have a government that is enabling it and supporting it through either its indifference or, in some cases, its direct assistance or indirect direct assistance. No, this isn't rambling. Don't let anybody tell you these white supremacists are rambling. They're not. They mean every damn word they say. I'm not going to stay on here terribly long, but by the way, if any of you want to weigh in, I'll give you a couple of minutes here. You can go ahead and throw your hand up. I did this tonight because they took my video down on Sunday, which is perfectly, like I say, it wasn't unexpected. It wasn't unexpected that they would do that. It wasn't unexpected because, having a serious discussion about what in the hell is going on, going into the details, letting you know that, by the way, this is exactly what the thought process is and the conclusions that were drawn by it, that when you have a knife that is sharpened to this point, it's going to be used. You can't tell these young white folk that black people's existence, just our very drawing breath, is a threat to them, and then expect that nobody's going to act on it. That's the whole point, is to keep this steady drum beat in their heads. These black folks, just the fact they're here, they spawn this, that, and the other. Well, forget about abortion and forget about, government oppression and everything like that. No, black folk are taking over. Okay, we're the poorest people in America, but all right. Look, damn it, they're here to replace us. Okay, well, actually, that's not the black folk because they're not the immigrants. Look, just genetic annihilation, damn it. And once you beat that into somebody's head long enough there, then obviously the next logical conclusion is, okay, we've identified the threat. We stated exactly what it is. What are we going to do about it? What are we going to do? Now that we understand it, we understand the threat as well or better than it knows itself. Now, there's the other thing right there. They understand black people, even if what they believe is not true, even if what they believe is not factually accurate. When you get into nonsense like phrenology and things, even if what they believe is not accurate, your goal is to understand that even if they've created a phony ideology, IQs and bell curves and other assorted idiocy, they create these constructs to reinforce what they believe. There's a reason why they gravitate to Nordic mythology. Now, nobody claims that people may claim that Christianity is based on real people. I'm not here to argue that. But in Islam, Muhammad was a real person. In Judaism, they'll argue that Moses and David were real people. Nobody argues that Zeus and Odin were real people. Nobody. Not even the ancient Nordics. They never argued that Odin and Zeus were real people. And yet, hate groups like Thor Steiner and others, using Nordic symbology, getting tattoos and everything else, they know, and if Thor isn't a real person, it doesn't exist, then what in the world are you doing having it permanently imprinted on your body then? Oh, because it represents something. That's what I'm tattooing. It represents something. Thor's hammer, it represents something. That's what the tattoo means. It's not because I believe that Thor exists. It is when you and I both say that word, Thor, you and I mean two different things. Well, there's only one Thor. I mean, Nordic mythology. Yes, that's true. I mean, God of thunder and lightning. Yes, true. Starred in a bunch of Marvel movies. Yeah, kind of. Okay, well, I know exactly who it is. Yeah, but you don't understand its representation of white greatness. What do you mean white greatness? He never existed. But he represents our greatness. That just a little bit more, just a little bit more, and we would be gods ourselves. You do understand that was Hitler's ideology. You do understand that when they talk about the Aryan race, ultimately their idea about the Aryan race is basically bestowed by the gods. For those of you who've never gone into that, they talk about the Nazis and the occult. But by the way, if you take a look into their master race, now I'm not breaking any new ground here for any of you who actually know your Nazi history. Then you understand that master race thing and being Aryans is basically descendants of the gods. Well, hell, if you truly believe in your heart of hearts that you are on such a higher level, that there is something intrinsically, and there's the real word, there is something intrinsically superior about you, then you do understand that doesn't require eternal life or vulnerability to take you to the next level. If you believe that you are just gifted, if you believe that you were just born gifted, then this other symbolism that you embrace allows you to execute the rest. It allows you to jump out of airplanes. It allows, when you sit there talking about, man, take a look at this. We can fly. Well, you got a jet engine on your back, actually, but we can fly. We can destroy whole cities. Hell, we got guns. Talk about thunder and lightning in your hands. Well, the rest of us, though, we created gunpowder millennia ago. Yeah, but you didn't weaponize it. Oh, no, we never wanted to kill 10 or 20,000 people. We never considered that to be a mark of greatness. Well, you were short-sighted. We had superior vision. Because you see, warfare for us is glory. We don't consider warfare to be glory. We consider it to be a tragedy and something to be avoided. See, inferior. And right now, in your theaters, they got what? Thor, Love and Thunder coming out. And like I say, it's very comical to see Chris Hemsworth out there with the chains and, he's getting all jacked up to be Thor again. It's all very, very whimsical, or at least it seems very whimsical. It seems very whimsical, and it's all fun and games until somebody who takes it more seriously comes along. Then it's not fun and games anymore. I don't want to get too deep off in the woods and whatnot, but for example, the God of War video game franchise. They got God of War Ragnarok coming out. I'm pretty sure it's coming out. I don't think it's come out yet. I'm pretty sure it hasn't come out yet. And the main enemy in this game this time will be Thor. Although he's far different from the Marvel interpretation. In the God of War video games, Thor is a bloodthirsty, murderous mass killer. Now, it's not something that they glorify. He's the chief bad guy to take down. But here's my point. My point is that no matter how you try to demonize something, if you have a group of people out there who are like, hey, root for the bad guy, that is good to be the bad guy. And some of you have experienced that. You've had movies that you watch that you like the bad guy more, the quote, bad guy more than you did the good guy. Darth Vader in Star Wars. Probably the most popular character, even more popular than Luke Skywalker, is Darth Vader. He's the bad guy. And yet, he's the most popular character. We can go down the list. Hans Gruber from Die Hard. Arnold Schwarzenegger in Terminator. The so-called bad guy in a lot of these films, in a lot of these movies, TV series, Tywin Lannister on Game of Thrones, a lot of before him, Khal Drogo, the bad guy can be more popular than the so-called good guy. So even if you attempt to demonize these things, just understand that actually can be used and rewritten and flipped and worked over to be turned into a positive. Don't think that just christening someone the bad guy is automatically going to be like, yeah, see, people are going to stay away from that. Actually, you can be a hero or you can be an anti-hero. You can be a hero or an anti-hero. It can work either way. It can be used either way. So just understand that in this story, the white supremacists have painted themselves neither as hero nor as villain. They've painted themselves as the only solution, and that anything that they do is permissible because, well, it had to be done. A distasteful business, but it had to be done. And your politicians, your corporate media, none of them are discussing this. None of them are really talking about this. They're already trying to move on. Hell, they were trying to move on Sunday. They're already trying to move past this. Don't let that happen. Do not let that happen. If nothing else, we need to be able to connect the dots between these events. Do not let that occur. Keep watching. And stay vigilant, because the goal is not to get the white supremacists to find religion. They already got their religion. It's called white supremacy. The goal is not to get them to see reason. They've already created an ideology that controls their reason. The goal is to make sure that we are prepared so that, and you've heard me say this now for years and years, the goal is not to get anybody to like us. It is not to get anyone to like us or favor us. Our goal is to get into a strong enough position so that whether people like us or don't like us, they can't harm us. There's a reason that they go after black folk and not Asians in mass, Jews in mass, all that talk they do about Jews, and yet they don't go after them in mass. They'll talk about Jews, but shoot at us. They talk about what they don't like about certain other groups. He was talking about he didn't like immigrants, but he was shooting at black people who were not immigrants. He was shooting at descendants of slaves, not immigrants. It's imperative that we understand that so that going forward, if you take a threat seriously, other folk are looking at you like, man, why are you doing that there? See, there's a reason why our numbers here in the new black media spike after these events occur. Because a bunch of folks get lax, they start lollygagging, they start playing around, they start getting careless. Every time there's a Zimmerman, Michael Dunn, Darren Wilson, Daniel Pantaleo, Amber Geiger, the list goes on. People sit up here and our numbers spike because everybody, once the white supremacists show up, everybody gets shook up and then they come looking for us. They come looking for us, and then as soon as it seems like the threat has subsided and they start backsliding until the next one happens, then they come running back over here again. Let's be very, very clear. Soft targets are the ignorant. I will say this again. The lesson to take home from the white supremacist mass shooter in Buffalo is that soft targets are the willfully ignorant. Those who cannot be bothered to think, cannot be bothered to care. More concerned about cell phones and tennis shoes and hairstyles and gossip at the church than about survival. Individuals who tell themselves, well, as long as I leave the white supremacists alone, they'll leave me alone. If I'm not thinking about them, they won't be thinking about me. You and all that old pro-black stuff, the people who say that. Y'all always going around about that pro-black stuff. As soon as the white supremacists start shooting, they show up at the pro-black channel. They sure do show up then. And it's not accidental. Everyone knows and acknowledges the threat. There are just those of us who fight it and those who go back to picking the cotton. People who are willfully ignorant, just understand you've met an enemy who is embracing your suicidal tendency. They are looking for soft targets, the willfully ignorant. Those who are unsuspecting and do not take the threat seriously. Those who are not constantly on guard. And I am not saying that being constantly on guard is guaranteed that you will be safe and okay. No, you're living in a random system. What I am saying is that being on guard is the only defense you actually have. You don't have any other. You ignore this threat at your own peril. We're going to go ahead and wrap things up here tonight. Thank you all for joining us here on Twitter Space. Go ahead and take a look in the description on my profile. You'll see the link to my YouTube channel. If you have been following me on Twitter and are not following me on YouTube, go over there and go subscribe. If you've been following me on YouTube and are not following me on Twitter, go ahead and click follow here. And if you are just new, go ahead and follow me on both. This gives you the news and insight analysis you'll receive nowhere else. Join us. And this concludes tonight's Twitter Space. I am your host, your brother, your humble servant, the Black Authority. And until next time, my brothers and sisters from around the world,